Hi, my name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas. This is Sunday, October the 8th, 2017. And I just came back from an event with a Democratic representative from another district. I went up to meet him. I saw that he had a meet and greet, so I thought, well, I might as well go. I usually talk to Republican leaders, but you know what? They're Democrat leaders too. And I think that a lot of times the Democrats and Republicans have the same core values in many respects. We have about 80% of the things in common, and it's the outer edges that we maybe disagree on, or we may disagree on the solutions to the problems. But regardless of who's in there, the issues that I wanted to address were bipartisan issues. They dealt with the issue of the family. They dealt with issues of marriage and children's protective services, grandparents' rights. And I told them right up front, I said, number one, I don't live in your district, and number two, I'm a Republican. I want to hear what you have to say. And he impressed me as being a man of integrity. There were a few things that we talked about that we may have seen a little bit differently at the beginning, but other issues that he said I was unaware of these, and he thanked me. He said, "Thank you for bringing the issues up to me." And in particular, we were talking about the issues of Children's Protective Services, how Children's Protective Services, in my view, does not need more funds. When you have between 2/3 and 3/4 of the calls that are made to Children's Protective Services, and they're false calls for whatever reason, and we put these caseloads on these CPS workers and then say, well, we need to have more funds. Well, basically, why don't we just keep on making more false calls then? Why don't we prosecute the false calls that are being made and reduce their caseload that way? The other thing being is that with CPS workers, we have right now in Texas, I believe it's just a 2 years of college. You don't have to have any children, 2 years of college, and you can be making decisions that can be affecting other people's lives. You have caseworkers that come in with no background of the family, but somehow they're the experts, and they can pull children out of families. And then the default mode for Children's Protective Services is, do we need to take the kids? Do we need to take the kids? I mentioned the issue of integrity in Children's Protective Services. As many of you know, I was falsely accused of making a report to Children's Protective Services. I begged Children's Protective Services to tell my daughter that I had nothing to do with the report. I was out of state. I had warned her about the abusive nature of Children's Protective Services. And Children's Protective Services decided that first I was told that it was policy that they could do nothing about it. And even though that was a lie, and later on they said, well, it was the best practice. So their best practice is to destroy a family. Now, Children's Protective Services did not get the blame for what my daughter did afterwards, but Children's Protective Services did have a role in this whole thing. We didn't talk about the idea with mandated reporters being kept in anonymity so that somebody else can be blamed. So that was one thing we didn't really talk about whatsoever. We talked about several other issues that I don't remember what all the issues were, to be honest with you, but then we also talked about the breakdown of the family. As many of you know, I've been, this past March, I was in Austin testifying for the repeal of no-fault divorce, and basically as a constitutional issue, the 5th and the 14th Amendment guaranteed due process of law, and yet when you're a respondent in a situation of divorce, and you may be the person who does not want the divorce, but you're the respondent, you lose 100% of the time. So where is due process in that whole thing? And on the other hand, what really no-fault divorce means, it becomes forced divorce. One person gets to destroy the family, gets to destroy the marital relationship, and even though that person may be at fault for the divorce, when it comes down to the division of assets, everything's split 50-50. So basically, no-fault divorce. What it comes down to is that it allows everybody to split things up evenly. So I can go into a marriage or whatever. I can cause the problem. I can cause the damage. I can destroy the marriage. But in the end, I get 50% of everything. There's no penalty for doing things that destroyed the marriage. That's just the way that it is. One of the issues I talked with them about as well was the impact of divorce on children. Layla Miller's book, Primal Loss, talking about the children of divorce that are finally speaking after 30 years after their parents got divorced. There's this myth goes around that says, children are resilient. And in this book, what she did, she captured about 70 different people answered the questions that she put out, just 8 questions. And what you find is that the description that they use are horrific. They talk about a tumultuous time, devastation, turmoil, emotional mess. They were crying. They went into poverty. All of these different things. In fact, if you want to be honest, some of the same descriptions that you may use of different, say the Las Vegas shooting or Hurricane Harvey, those are the way that children describe, adult children, out of divorce, described the impact of divorce on their lives. And my argument says, who argues for the due process of the children? You should not be deprived of life, liberty, nor property, and yet children are continually being deprived of their family. In the vast majority of no-fault divorce cases, or unilateral divorce, because one person wants a divorce, the other one doesn't, I mentioned that, irreconcilable differences. What exactly are irreconcilable differences? Can you describe what an irreconcilable difference is? And then furthermore, in about 6 to 8% of marriages that have gone through divorce because of irreconcilable differences, they remarry each other. So now, do you have a case of perjury? What exactly just happened there? You said it was irreconcilable, it was irretrievable, and now you're remarried to the same person. Did you lie in court? What is the issue here? You don't really know what irreconcilable differences is. There's 50 different states. There's 50 different definitions. You don't even know what it is, but you're guilty. And as I mentioned to him, I said, in divorce, you have more rights as a rapist or as a murderer. Why is that? Because if you're a rapist or a murderer, you have a presumption of innocence. If you're the respondent to no-fault divorce, you're guilty. It's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, if you're a rapist or a murderer or accused of that, you get to hire an attorney and you can defend yourself, and maybe you are innocent. In no-fault divorce, it doesn't make a difference. You can hire an attorney, you can drag it out, you can do this. You're always guilty at the end. It's going to happen. And the people who make the money off of this are the attorneys. So when you talk about no-fault divorce issues in the state of Texas, you also have to talk about reforming the family bar and the practices of the family attorneys. We need to quit excusing this. So family attorneys, of course, they will tell you, well, what's your net worth? And, of course, they're down there because they just want to make sure you get your fair share. Well, they also want to see how much they can bleed from you so that if you're worth $1 million, well, you know what? We can get a whole lot of money out of this. And what's also another dirty secret of the family law system is that sometimes the opposing attorneys will be buddies, social club buddies. And they'll even get together at lunch and they'll say, you know what? I'm going to do this, you do that, I'll do this, I'll do that. The ultimate end is going to be the same. It's going to be a divorce period. But in the meantime, they get to plunder the assets of the family. I've got friends that have had children going to college, and their college funds are depleted because of these wonderful people that we call family law attorneys. And then I've got other friends who they go through this, they get decimated. A lot of times the people, the person who files first almost always has the advantage, almost always wins. There may be some exceptions, but by and large, the person who is the most, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to screw my partner over, that person will win for the most part. So the other person might be like, I'm trying to save this marriage. Well, to try to save the marriage puts you in a position of weakness. And of course, the attorneys get in there and they say, well, you've hired us to be your attorney, so now we've got to win for you. And they will counsel things at times that are completely wrong morally. Sometimes you get a woman who will file a report of, I'm afraid of him, he might hurt me. So now he gets a restraining order put upon him because nobody wants to not put a restraining order on him. And then at that point, she gets custody of the children. And he might be like, what just happened here? He was never accused of any type of violence or anything like that in the past, but now he's got a restraining order upon him, and now he's going to lose his kids. And oh, by the way, the judge is going to say, we are going to determine that you owe so much. It may be alimony, but it is also child support. So, and by the way, you're going to get to pay this child support, but you're not going to get to see your children that much. And in the state of Texas, and in many places actually, there is incentives from the federal government for child support enforcement. And as you collect this money, the federal government gives you money to make sure that the money is being collected. Attorney General Ken Paxton in Texas, he knows all about this. We were at a meeting with him back in February, I believe, and he said that 2,600 of his 4,200 people work in child support enforcement collection. 62% of his staff does. And he was still looking for volunteers to help out because of the caseload. He was also bragging that for every $1 that Texas spends, they recoup $12.25. What they don't really tell you as well is that if you're a father or a mother, traditionally the fathers were the breadwinners and they had the child support, but that's happening more to mothers now as well. If for any reason something happens, you lose your job or whatever and you can't make your support, you can go to jail. So you may be the person who didn't want the divorce, who's trying to keep the family, and now you lose your job because your emotional wreck or whatever the case may be, and now you're behind on child support. You can go to jail. You can lose your driver's license. I had a friend who was arrested trying to get his driver's license renewed because he was behind a couple of payments. I think he switched jobs or something and it didn't catch up. And that was it. They arrested him put them in jail. You can have your vehicle registration denied. You can basically, if you're, especially if you're a man, and I'm not a man's right activist, I'm not a woman's right activist. I want human rights, but in many instances, if you're a man, the system tends to work against you, and that's just the way that it is. So we talked about the issues of no-fault divorce. We talked about the effect that had on the children. He promised me he would read Layla Miller's book. I gave him the recommendation he would look into it. The issues with grandparents' rights, I mentioned a little bit about what happened to me as a grandfather with my grandchildren, how I had been watching them, and in fact, Children's Protective Services actually stopped anything that they were going to do because my wife and I were just wonderful, were a strong safety net for our grandchildren. And yet the Children's Protective Services would not tell my daughter that I had nothing to do with the call, so I have not seen my grandchildren for 2.5 years now. And part of that is, a lot of that's on her, but also CPS has a part of that. I'd mentioned how I spoke with Hank Whitman and testified down in Austin, and I told him where to look, so he's going to look at the video. And I told him how I went up to Hank Whitman afterwards, looked him in the eye, shook him in the hand. Hank Whitman shook his hand. Hank Whitman was going to get back to me. Hank Whitman still hasn't gotten back to me. The only reason I received anything from Children's Protective Services is because another senator, who does not in my district, Senator Van Taylor, had some of his staff get involved, and CPS wrote to, or the Department of Children's and Family Services, I think it is, that oversees them, or something like that. They wrote me a letter, and it was basically, I'm going to cover my rear end letter, because it was the weakest sort of letter that would just say, like, you know what, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to kind of satisfy the goal, but it's a BS letter, to be honest with you, in my opinion. And I said, at Children's Protective Services, what's lacking is integrity. If you break up a family unnecessarily, if you cause damage, you go back and you seek to make it right. That's integrity. If I do something wrong, I go back and I apologize. I try to make it right. And why is it that government agencies don't have to do this? Why is it that judges can destroy families and never have to make things right? Or family law attorneys, he's just a wonderful family law attorney, when he's destroyed a person or the children in the marriage? I don't understand why we allow this to take place. So he's a Democrat, and we agree on a lot of the same issues. My friend, who's the Republican, is running against him, and strongly support him as well. I will be talking with him also. I'm going to talk as far as I can with every type of legislator, whether he or she is Democrat or Republican, because the issues that I'm dealing with are neither Democratic issues nor Republican issues. They are affecting every single person in the state of Texas, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of age. So that's where I stand, and if you would like to do the same, I'd encourage you. And then share the results with other people so that we can start to find out who the better people are, and who the people are who have viewpoints that differ from us. Thank you for listening, and that's it. Thank you.